Lost in the snow. It's 3 a.m. and I still can't sleep. Actually, I haven't been able to relax at all since we got back from our camping trip. My mom keeps telling me that I'm still in shock from everything that happened, but I disagree. Don't get me wrong, I gag every time I think about seeing Jake's body, and the thought that Annie could have suffered the same horrible end makes me want to break down in tears. But that isn't what's keeping me up. Before I get ahead of myself, let me start from the beginning. Maybe you'll be able to see what I mean. You sure you have everything? My dad asked as he helped stuff the last of my bags in the car, being careful not to drop everything in the snow. For the 100th time, yes, I answered, slightly irritated. My mom reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the car keys. We're just worried, Kate, she said, handing me the keys. Camping during the winter is a whole lot different than during the spring or summer. Mom, it will be fine. We've all done our research and are beyond prepared. My mom smiled and gave me a hug. Just use good judgment and always make sure your phone is charged, my dad instructed. You remembered your portable charger, right? I rolled my eyes. Yes, Dad, I got it, along with 5 backups just in case. That's my girl, he chuckled. After going over my checklist one final time, I said goodbye and drove off. I started going camping with some friends from high school back in the 9th grade. Our group consisted of the nature-loving power couple Stephen and Margaret, myself and our friend Jake. Up until now, we've had only gone on short weekend trips at nearby campgrounds. Steve and Margaret were the only ones who planned everything down to the very last detail. Actually, they were the ones who started the whole camping trip thing to begin with. I was pretty stoked when they first had the idea, but lost some of the interest when they told me Jake would be joining us. I didn't necessarily hate the guy. After all, he was always nice to me and my friends. But it was the way he acted around other girls that just rubbed me the wrong way. I would see how he treated girls in the halls at school, barely showing any interest in what they were saying, yet somehow manipulating them into wanting going out with him, and it just made me uneasy. After going on a couple of trips with this guy, I have to say I got used to him. Then again, it was always just him. Jake had been dating Annie for a couple of months. The two seemed irreparable, but I wasn't entirely sold on their relationship. Annie was a sweetheart, and Jake always seemed to treat her poorly. She would watch as he flirted with other girls at school, and never seemed to mind when he flaked on her. Margaret and I both noticed this after a while and tried to talk to her to see if she was actually happy. Of course, she would always tell us that she was fine and thank us for being great friends. Needless to say, it was clear that something was up, but we didn't want to pry. A couple of weeks before the winter break, Jane asked Annie if she wanted to come on our winter camping trip. When Annie said yes, Jake seemed genuinely excited. We thought that maybe this was a sign that their relationship was finally headed in the right direction. We were all scheduled to meet at Stephen's house at 7 a.m. that day. When I arrived, Margaret was already helping him load supplies into his 2007 Chevy Suburban. I parked my car in the street in the front of the house. "Morning, guys," I chirped. I closed the door to my car and opened the trunk. "Are you sure we have enough room?" I asked, quickly glancing in the back of the Suburban, which was already pretty full. "Of course," answered Stephen. "She's never let me down." Margaret walked over to help me unload my car. "Yeah, it should be fine," she asked. "Besides, I doubt Annie and Jake will bring that much. You know he always underpacks." We both giggled and started loading my supplies into the car. Jake and Annie arrived about 15 minutes after I did. As Margaret had predicted, they were significantly underpacked. "You sure this is enough for you two?" Margaret asked. "Of course," Jake answered. He turned to Stephen and grinned. "And if not, we'll just borrow some stuff of yours." Stephen laughed. He took Jake and Annie's bag and neatly packed them in the back of the Suburban. "Hey Stephen," Annie asked, "do you mind if I use your bathroom before we go?" "Go ahead," he answered. "Margaret, can you show Annie where the bathroom is?" Margaret nodded and she led Annie inside. When they were out of sight, I asked Jake how everything was going between them. "Honestly, not great," he said, putting his hands in both his pockets of his black coat. "I think this will be our last hooray before I call it quits." Hearing this pissed me off. Why would you invite her on a week-long camping trip if you are planning on breaking up with her? I asked. That's fucked up. Gotta agree with Kate, man, Stephen said. She's a nice girl. Why would you string her along? Jake started to get a little defensive after hearing both our opinions on the whole thing. Look, he answered, I never said it was definitive. If anything, I'm hoping this whole thing can fix everything, you know? Steve and I looked at each other. We knew Jake was trying to avoid being pinned as the bad guy. We heard as the door to the house opened and closed as Margaret and Annie walked out. Just don't start any drama, okay? Stephen whispered to Jake. Won't be a problem, Jake answered. Don't worry. Stephen patted Jake on the back and opened up the door to the Suburban. The drive to the mountain was long. Since we got up so early, some of us took naps so we wouldn't be completely wiped out before we even got there. We arrived at the mountain around 10 a.m. to meet our guide at the lodge. He went over everything we needed to know about camping on the mountain, as well as gave us some hints on where the best spots might be. He also mentioned that fireworks should be taking place later that night around 8 p.m. You lucked out, he said as he walked us to the gondola. This week is supposed to be beautiful. We all laughed. After thanking him, we loaded all of our camping supplies into the gondola and proceeded up to the mountain. Alright guys, said Stephen looking at his map. I think the spot we want is around 5 minutes from here. Should be a pretty easy walk. We followed Stephen down the eastern path, leading away from the gondola. The sunlight glinted off the pearly pearls of snow, which added a hint of magic to the already beautiful winter scene. Even though it was chilly, the light warmed our faces and gave us the last bit of energy we needed to finally start the day. I usually don't like the quiet that sometimes comes with being so far away from the city, but there was something about this kind of quiet that filled me up with a sense of comfort. It was with my friends and this amazing adventure that not many people can say they have experienced. For this, I was thankful. When we reached our campsite, I started to get really excited. I wanted to start setting everything up as soon as possible so I could have some me time to explore the area. It took us a little over an hour to set up the tents and to get comfortable. After everyone was unpacked, we ate our luncheons and the small picnic table next to the sign that read Campsite 8. "This is so cool, you guys," I said between bites of my tuna sandwich. I turned to Stephen and Margaret, who both had large cups of chili. "So, what do we want to do?" "Well, I'm super pumped for those fireworks," said Margaret. "I was going to go see if I could find a good spot for us to watch." "Oh, awesome! I'll come with you," I answered excitedly. It was then that I noticed that Annie had stopped eating and was completely turned into our conversation. "Annie, you should come too," I said with a smile. "I'd love to," Annie said. She turned to Jake. "You don't mind, right?" "Nope. Knock yourself out," he answered. I could tell that he was becoming indifferent towards Annie and started to make me mad. I was going to say something, but decided it would be the best to let it go. After all, I wanted all of us to have the best time of our lives. After lunch, Margaret, Annie and I grabbed our chairs and went for a walk to try and find a perfect spot to watch the fireworks. The only information our guide gave us was that they could be seen from anywhere on the mountains as long as the trees weren't in our way. After a short walk, we ended up stumbling upon a clearing with a gorgeous view. "Oh wow," Annie said. "You can see the lodge from here and everything." "I think we found our spot," said Margaret triumphantly. "It's not that far away from the campsite either, which is nice. But I'll mark it on the map just in case." We'll set up our chairs and sat down. We took in all that we could while talking about the end of high school and we had plans on going to college. I was the only one between the three of us that didn't have a clear plan, but I was okay with that. I've always been a sort of go-with-the-flow type of person. I was, however, very impressed with Annie. She told us she was looking at art colleges in the East Coast. Once she decided on one, she would be moving there after graduation. She also told us that her parents were moving back to Russia after they helped her move. "Won't you miss your parents?" I asked Annie. I thought about how much I would spend with my family and how hard it was going to be to move 10 minutes away. This girl was moving across the country. "Of course I will," she answered, "but I know they will come visit. Plus, I have family in Boston, so it's not like I will be completely alone over there." Margaret looked at Annie and smiled. "Well, you better stay in touch. We might not be close, but we can still bug the hell out of you on Skype." Annie giggled. "I'm holding you on that," she said. Now I'm someone who's been known to kill the moods. It's honestly probably one of the reasons why I still don't have a special someone in my life. After our nice talk about the future, I said something I honestly regretted. What about Jake? I asked. I just mean, like, do you think you'll stay together or... Margaret frowned and gave me that "are you kidding" look I am all that familiar with. Before I could apologize, Annie chimed in. As much as I like to think that we'll stay together, I get the feeling we might not even have to last until the end of the year. Margaret and I looked at one another. We weren't at all surprised, but we were a little taken back that Annie was the one to admit it. What do you mean? Margaret asked. He just isn't the guy I thought he was, Annie responded, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. I tried not to let his personality bother me, but the truth is, I hate it. I didn't say anything and neither did Margaret did. I could tell that we both wanted to hear more, as this was the first time we heard Annie say that anything negative about Jake. He's not good to me, she continued, but whenever I bring up my concerns, he gets angry. So angry that I'd rather put up with feeling unloved than deal with his attitude. So angry that I'd rather put up with feeling unloved than deal with his attitude. Hearing this broke my heart and I almost teared up. Jake was never my favorite person, but was he really that awful of a boyfriend? The worst part was, Annie didn't look phased at all. She just sat there, staring longingly into the distance. Why did you come on this camping trip with him? Margaret asked, a hint of worry in her voice. Despite everything, I still have feelings for him, Annie said with a laugh. I was hoping this trip would bring us closer together, but sadly, I don't see that happening. Annie leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. I'll get over it though. She sighed as positively returned. Of course she will, I said reassuringly. Believe me, you'll have no issue finding someone else when we get back. I already know several guys who have major crushes on you already. Annie laughed and shook her head. After our serious talk, the conversation shifted to pitiful love life, giving us all much needed laugh. When we got back to the campsite, Stephen and Jake had already broken into beers. Jake snacked from the fridge. Is that really all you guys bought? Thanks a lot, I hate beer, I complained. There's nothing worse than being the sober fifth wheel. It's cool, Annie chipped. I don't drink, so I'll be sitting this one out too. I felt relieved. Thank God, I said. Have I mentioned yet how much I love your girlfriend, Jake? Jake didn't respond right away, but was already pretty gone, so I wasn't expecting much. Hello? I exclaimed. Anyone there? It's super lame, he slurred. She's just a buzzkill. I felt myself getting protective over Annie. How dare he talk like her about that, especially when she was sitting right there. You are really a dick, you know that? I yelled. Everyone went silent. She deserves way better than you fucking piece of shit ass, you know that. Stephen stood up. Okay, let's calm down. No need for this. I sat down in my chair. tried to cool off. Stephen turned to Annie. He didn't mean that. It's fine, she laughed. I could tell this was just a piece. If anything, it made him angrier. We managed to salvage the rest of the afternoon despite the drama. Annie and I actually had a lot of fun making fun of our drunk friends. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. It was the alarm I set for the fireworks. Hey guys, let's get going. We don't want it getting dark before we head over. Yeah, let's get going, said Margaret, who was hammered at this point. Stephen helped her out of the seat. You okay, babe? You look a little sick. Stephen looked at me. She okay? I rolled my eyes. Seriously, she's your girlfriend, bro. I walked over to Margaret, who was clearly about to get sick. Okay, girlie, if you're gonna puke, then do it in the woods. Margaret gave me what looked like a thumbs up and started stumbling towards the nearby trees. I turned to Stephen. I'll stay with her, I sighed. You guys follow Annie. She should have the spots marked on the map, so you won't get lost. Thanks, dude. Make sure she's okay, I nodded. Margaret has always been known to puke and rally. After she gets sick, she'll be back on her feet ready to go. It took a little longer for her to feel better, but after drinking and snacking on the granola bars, she was perfectly fine. You're not human, are you? I teased. Barely, she giggled. Okay, let me brush my teeth real quick and then we can head out. The sky was starting to get dark. I knew we would have to hustle if we want to make the walk easier. The trees surrounding our campsites started to lose their shape and the path to the clearing started getting smaller. Are you done yet? I asked urgently in my voice. Walking there in the dark isn't going to be fun, you know. Margaret poked her head out the tent and spit in the snow. All good, let's... Before Margaret could even get out of her tent, we noticed the flashlight speeding towards the path towards us. When they finally reached the site, we saw that it was Stephen and Jake. What are you guys doing? Did you forget something? I asked. My eyes darted around the space between them. Where's Annie? Jake and Stephen didn't say a word. Margaret got out of her tent. You just left her alone in the clearing, she yelled. What's wrong with you? I studied their faces and suddenly filled with an overwhelming sense of fear when I saw their expressions. They looked petrified, like they had just witnessed something horrifying. My words started to turn into anger and pulled on Jake's arm. Where is your fucking girlfriend? I demanded. Jake didn't answer me. He couldn't even look at me. This made me lose it. Where is she? Where the fuck is Annie? I don't know. Jake snapped out of whatever spell he was under and crumbled to the ground. We looked everywhere and couldn't find her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could Annie have just disappeared? The walk to the clearing was short, plus she had a map. We all stood there, frozen for what felt like a lifetime. Finally, Stephen spoke up. We need to get help, he said in a weak voice. I had never seen him like this. Stephen always kept his cool under pressure, but was barely an expert in all things outdoors. For him not to know what to do made me feel completely hopeless. We need to go to the lodge and tell them Annie is missing in the woods. Okay, said Margaret. It'll be okay then, right? They'll find her. Stephen nodded. I'm sure they will. His voice started to come back to reassure his girlfriend. I, however, saw right through him. He was just as terrified as Jake, who was frantically wiping away tears. Something was not right, but what I couldn't understand was why they wouldn't tell us what happened. The search for Anastasia Morozov continued for the entire week without luck. Things got worse when the snowstorm started to roll in. School would be starting again in a few days, and we all needed to go back home. All I wanted to do was see my parents as we were leaving. We saw Annie's parents talking to the rangers. Her mom was crying, and her dad was doing everything he could to comfort her, even though he was clearly losing his mind as well. I wanted to say something like, I'm so sorry, or they find her, but I was sure I'd only make the situation worse. We started to walk past them when Annie's dad and Jake locked eyes. You, the man yelled. What did you do to my daughter? The man stopped us in all our tracks. We were sure that it was just a typical reaction from a parent with a missing child. But even still, Mr. Morozov approached Jake as he was convinced he murdered her, or something. Sir, Jake squeaked. I'm so sorry, Mr. Markinsov, said Stephen, rushing into Jake's defense. I was with him. 1 minute she was there, and the next she was gone. It wasn't him, sir. I promise. Annie's dad stared at Stephen, and then back at Jake. This isn't over, he threatened before walking back to his wife and the rangers. We all looked at Jake, who was paler than usual. Without a word, he started walking back towards the lodge exit. Stephen hurried after him, followed by Margaret and myself. None of us said a word during the car ride home. The storm was getting worse until finally the snow was so bad we couldn't even see. It was almost like it was following us and just wouldn't let up. After a while, Stephen spotted a rest stop at the gas station. He slowly turned off the highway, being careful not to skid in the ice, and parked by one of the gas pumps. Okay, he said, breaking the silence. I'm not driving in this. Let's just wait here until the storm dies down a bit. Everyone agreed. I need to take a leak. Does that store look open to you guys? Jake asked. Doubt it, I asked. Especially, everything is probably closed down due to the storm. Jake grunted and got out of the car. I'd just go behind a tree or something. With that, he walked off. We could barely make out the silhouette, even though he was still close to the car. As I stared out of the window, I began to drift off to sleep. The sound of snow and wind enveloped my mind like some kind of eerie lullaby. As I approached the gates of dreamland, I was finally pulled back to reality when Jake burst into Suburban. Drive! He shouted. Drive, now! Stephen looked up and panicked in his fright and confusion. Whoa, we can't drive. You see how dangerous the road is right now? We'll be safer if we stay here. No, we won't be. There's something in the roots. Drive, now. We were starting to get afraid. Are you sure you didn't see just a deer or something? Margaret asked. I'm sure whatever it is, it can't hold its own against the Suburban. Drive the car now! Jake yelled, louder this time. Clearly he was not changing his mind regardless of any of us said. Stephen started to get angry. Dude, what the hell, man? Calm your shit. Drive the fucking car! The next few seconds were a confusing mess that is still hard to recall. All I can remember is the struggle between Jake and Stephen. The Suburban hurtling forward at full speed and white lights. I don't even remember the impact of the car crash or remember hearing anyone scream, but I can remember what happened when we all came to. I looked around to scan the inside of the Suburban. Guys, is everyone okay? We're okay, I think, said Margaret. Her nose was bleeding from smashing her face on the seat in front of her. I'm sure it was broken, but the adrenaline was so high that nobody seemed to acknowledge any of their injuries. Stephen rubbed his eyes. Where the hell is Jake? He asked. A feeling of panic set in when we noticed that the passenger side door had been ripped clean off the car. What was odd was that the crash could not have nearly been bad enough for something like that to happen. Stephen shifted over the passenger side and climbed out the door. Margaret and I followed. The storm had subsided and the night's weather had returned. It was the same weather we had experienced the first day on the mountain, but this made me feel nauseous. It was like some sick joke. No way a blizzard this bad just disappeared. We stumbled around. Rest stopped looking for Jake for what seemed like hours. No luck. We should check the woods, Steve said. He couldn't have gone that far. Margaret and I nodded. One of us should stay here and call 911, Margaret suggested. You should stay here and I call them, I said. It would be good if someone is in the car in case Jake comes back too. With those last few words, Stephen ventured into the nearby woods. It wasn't long before we stumbled across a grisly scene. A frozen corpse was sitting propped up against one of the trees. Its eyes were gone. Its hair was barely visible, but worst of all was its mouth. A lot of the teeth had rotten or fallen out, but you could still see that the corners were turned up into a smile. It wasn't a creepy smile though. In fact, it was almost peaceful. It looked like whoever this was had greeted death with open arms. Stephen and I both got sick as we got closer and saw the body had Jake's jacket on. This makes no sense, I said, my voice quivering in fear as tears ran down my face. He looks like he's been dead for months. Stephen grabbed my hand and pulled me in the direction of the rest stop. It's not him, he mumbled aggressively. There's no way it's him. When we got back into the car, the police were already there. We explained what we saw and a team of police officers went into the forest to investigate. We didn't stick around long enough to see the officers bring the body out of the forest. We were all taken to the hospital to get checked out and were later picked up by our families. It's been a week since I got home from the hospital. School starts tomorrow and I'm not sure how I'm going to act. My mom was watching the news earlier and I overheard her and my dad talking. Turns out, the body that had been identified as the 18-year-old Jake Norton, after all. Remember how I said that something about this doesn't make sense? I'm not an expert, but I don't think blizzards can age a corpse that quickly. None of the authorities have mentioned anything about it either, and have yet to reveal the cause of death to the public. What's also weird is that the car door was just ripped off like nothing. It was like the hinges were made out of clay. A car crash definitely didn't cause that. And there is no way the wind was strong enough to tear it off either. And then there was Annie. We still have no idea what happened to her. Could she still be alive? Or did she suffer the same fate as Jake? To be honest, I don't know what worse is at this point. All I can tell you is that the storm has started back up again in town. It's not as bad as it was that day, but it's certainly not in the weather forecast. Okay, I need to go to bed, if I can. Before I do, there's one last thing that I want to mention. I might be going crazy, and it's possibly just the wind, but every time I close my eyes, I swear I can hear a voice that sounds like it's right outside my window. It's a girl's voice, and it keeps saying, "I'm cold.